today is vastly different today than it was 28 years ago. Remember, it's at a sort of historical, it's at a historical moment. It is so lauded, it's so sexy to be in business, it's so glamorous to be in business. You know, you're as high profile as pop stars and as movie stars. It's, you know, it's celebrated. It's seen as the great creator of jobs. It's the great technological advances. It's innovation. It's wealth. That's why it's good to be in business. That's why all our schools are training young children to be in business. To be in business at 10 years old. To have an enterprise culture at 8 years old. To force us into believing that the entire purpose of life is to consume. That's what's going on now. And I've looked at businesses and I think there's a dark side to it. I see businesses now as totally in control. They're in control. My government is an economic government. America is definitely an economic government. And I guess this government is an economic government too. So it measures itself by its economic standards, its economic growth, its economic advantages, its relationships, its strategic alliances, the economic way. Shaped and propelled by those huge global institutions. Politicians and business people, I believe, and I believe this so utterly sincerely, they will drive us off the edge. These global planning institutions, like the World Bank, like the IMF, and especially the World Trade, are ignoring this enormous mounting evidence that I see as I travel of this impending social catastrophe that leaves widespread and dangerous inequality and insecurity. That's what I'm seeing as I'm traveling. Now these institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, GATS and NAFTA, MIA, they're not working for the majority of humanity. They certainly don't give a damn if you're poor. And they believe that they tell us that the roots of conflict are amongst those people, amongst the dispossessed, amongst the terrorists, amongst the poor. But they're not. The areas of, I believe, some of the areas of conflict have been found in these global planning institutions that lead them into retaliation. I believe as I travel consistently that the biggest social catastrophe we have there now, out there, today, at this moment, is poverty. Not only economic poverty, but poverty of imagination that doesn't give people the tools to get out of poverty, and spiritual poverty, that we don't give one damn that people, billions and billions of people, are in a slavery economy to make us healthy and wealthier, but certainly not wise. So it's depressing for me. It was depressing when I went to Seattle at the protest, the first global protest against the World Trade Organization. It was depressing to see that the world's economic leaders weren't listening to the indigenous people, weren't listening to the farmers, weren't listening to the unions, just were not interested. They were just wanting to do deals in big hotel rooms, doing deals with certain countries. That's what they were doing. It was depressing. But then sometimes something magical happens. And what's magical is, I believe, it says change. And, you know, it doesn't come about change in business. It won't come about done by a government. No way. It won't come about by businesses self-regulating, because they're not good at that stuff. I think it comes down to this little group of dissenters, these little group of sort of persistence of small committed groups of people who are willing to fail, consistently fail, over a long period of time, until that extraordinary, wonderful moment when this dam of oppression and indifference and greed finally cracks, and those in power finally accept that the world's people have been saying for all along that there has to be a revolution in business and in kindness. Things have got to be different. Being Italian makes me pathologically optimistic. And I'm saying that consistently because I eat a lot of tomatoes. And there's a serotonin in tomatoes that keeps you smiling. I don't think anybody's ever met a miserable Italian. They're met very happy, they're met very stupid, they've met very self-absorbed, but they've never met a miserable Italian, and I put that down to tomatoes. So I'm going to be optimistic on this business agenda, because I do see extraordinary practices going on, and I see movements being held, and I've been part of the sort of architecture for this new renaissance in social responsibility. Many businesses, many of them, many in America, many in Europe, were part of this sort of social movement, responsibility movement. And I was introduced to this at the present time by a group of quite crazy people in America. They were called the Donuts. Donuts is an English cake, but dough means money and nuts means crazy. So people with a lot of money who were crazy. And they got together, and they were young, inherited wealth. There were people from progressive businesses like Ben & Jerry's, like the Body Shop. They were talking to the non-government organization and the foundations, and they sort of loosely got together a few years back, a decade or so back, and maybe 2 decades now. And they said, how do we make businesses kinder? How do we make it more considerate, more thoughtful? How do we bring in another agenda other than the ever-increasing number of profits or barrels of oil? And this isn't new, the social responsibility. It sort of goes back to Robert Owen in English history and the early cooperative movement. And the Quakers, what a wonderful group of people they were. Highly religious, but brilliant and Christian. Not but, and brilliant business people. They never lied. Can you believe that today in business? Never lying. They never stole. Can you believe that today in business? Never stealing. They never took out more money than they put back in. And they gave money to the community. They thanked the community for giving in its wealth. They built schools, they built villages, they built townships, the Quakers. And when we learned from the Amishes and the Shakers, these religious groups that got together just to survive and to live a way of life that wasn't shaped by Western or modern thinking. And these were the guiding principles of the social network that we have, the social responsibility. And all it's doing is trying to re-emerge in our sort of corporate consciousness. And I think many of us in business in those early days in the 70s would have rather slit our wrists than ever to be seen as corporate Americans or corporate, business people. We didn't believe that we were there just to be a financial scientist. We were traders. We were great at buying and selling, and that magical place where we sold our products. We had the zealousness of a religious convert, believing that business wasn't just financial science. It was where profit was the sole reason for being. It was more about participating in social and political activism, using products, using our lorries, our trucks, our windows, our clothes, our ice cream cones, as sort of ambassadors for social change, and leveraging our customers to come in and make a statement on social action. In short, for me, it was about bringing my activism to the workplace. Now, this isn't an easy movement. It is terrorized by the media who don't understand it and don't like it and try and force us into time capsules. And they take every word we say and they shape it. So you want to be an honest company, but are you it now? So you want to be honourable, but are you it now? So there's this whole terrorism of measurements that behests us. It's a very complex, it's a very paradoxical movement, not least because the measurements are ill-defined. Is it simply just okay to practice with environmental housekeeping, to clean up your mess when you make a mess, to be kind to your employees, to care for the community you're in? Isn't that it? Isn't that enough? To be transparent about my finances as well? Have I got to do more than that? I say it's not necessarily enough. I think it's all of that and it's more. And the addition for me, as I'll study later, is the politics of consciousness. It's also about reaching out for other organizations, going into business schools, going into universities like today, and other corporations. And I'm not just talking about trading associations. I'm talking about the alternative trade federations, like the fair trade groups. I'm talking about the human rights groups. I'm talking about the coalition of churches. Amazing group in Canada, and now in America, and replicating itself in England, where they're bravely going and buying share prices or shares into large corporations and challenging the corporations at the annual general meeting. I'm talking about the cooperative movement, the Community Economic Development Act, it's independent think tanks coming out of universities, sometimes coming out of government, worse, but coming out of the human rights groups or the social justice movement. I'm talking about the trade justice movement as it is in England, philosophers, academic philosophers, politicians, political scientists, framing big questions, bigger questions than how much more profit can I make. This informal democratic network, I believe this process of connection is absolutely vital to our ability to shape a deeper thoughtfulness, to frame those bigger questions. The big questions are these. How do you bring human fulfillment into the community of the workplace? How do you deal with the crisis of mass unemployment? Because businesses don't create jobs anymore. They create wealth for an ever-decreasing number of executives. They're not to own a business, is not to create jobs, unless potentially you might be in the retailing sector or the direct selling sector. How do you deal with this problem of social alienation with our youth? How do you deal with the stranglehold of the multinationals on our figure and our whole economy? And how do we measure ourselves against a different standard? Because what we need to know, all of us in these businesses that want to shape businesses differently, we need to know if we've made a difference. We feel businesses needs to respect communities and need to encourage countries to educate their kids. We need businesses to help countries heal their sick, value the work of women, and respect human rights, to listen to the wisdom of indigenous people. In short, to reclaim what is essentially being human. I don't believe businesses, when you look at the measurement now, it's this. The only accurate descriptor of the gross national product, said Ralph Nader, is the word growth. We need to measure progress by human development, not just gross national product. You hear so much about increased rates of growth in production, but you don't hear much about stronger communities or healthier children. You hear much about the march of progress, but you hear never anything about the creatures and the peoples you trampled underfoot. We hear a lot about productivity and efficiency, but nothing, absolutely nothing, about the creativity of the human spirit. Bearing all this in mind, I would like to take you on a little journey to show you how we translated this notion of social responsiveness and imprinting the values and facing the problems I've spoken about in our daily business practice. It was a crazy journey. It was experiment. It's exhausting, absolutely exhausting, trying to break down the barriers that they teach you about in business and traditional ways of working. When the traditional way of working was always hierarchical, when especially women's organizations and women-run businesses hated hierarchy, and entrepreneurs hate it even worse. I mean, entrepreneurs, I don't know how you study an entrepreneur, because if you study crazy people, because that's what we are. We have more in common with a crazy person. We vision. We can see things others don't. The only difference between us and a crazy person is that we can articulate it. We talk in the present tense about our ideas. We can't manage anything. We can't manage ourselves out of a paper bag. That's why we need somebody to take our ideas and to progress them and expedite them. We have a sense of social change in ourselves. I've never met one entrepreneur in my life that is obsessed with money or the accumulation of money or wealth. They're obsessed with seeing how far their idea can go. And they're outsiders, entrepreneurs. They have a work ethic. This is why immigrants are such brilliant entrepreneurs. It's hard to find an entrepreneur these days that comes from a wealthy background, is comfortable, and hasn't had this hunger for freedom, this hunger for a sense of identity. So I believe this is a journey, and a journey where when I opened up the body shop, I had no belief that I was wanting to be part of a big business. It was only for 2 years until my husband came back from his horse ride from Argentina to New York, and then we were going to Australia to open up a pineapple plantation. So I'm a bit fortunate being here, in a way, because I had no vision for being a big business. In fact, being big was not of any interest to me. You know, once you're big, you're big. What was interesting to me is to be brave and to be different and to be vital and to be challenging, go in the opposite direction of everybody. The cosmetic industry, marketing groups, whatever they were doing, I wanted to do things differently. But when you work with this new thinking, and it has a moral overtone to it, an ethical overtone, the best you can do is better than you ever imagined. And if progress is managed from the heart, great things in business can and will happen. But one thing remains absolutely clear: for credibility and for reputation, you have to walk the talk. Rhetoric says nothing. Rhetoric says you walk the talk in everything you do. So here comes the big question for me: how can I integrate my behavior at work with my social values as a citizen in the larger world? And let me tell you by stages how I did this, and by the examples for the last 28 years. I sort of attempted to do business, that's what I did, use my business as a communication vehicle for change, for social change. And let me start with the word community. You know, it's very interesting. You can open up almost any management book and you will find words like total quality management, management by running in part, management by doing things faster, management by going to sleep, whatever management, management by warfare. You can see words like community, no, you can see words like progress, you know, words like identity, respect. You do not ever find the word community. Rarely do you find the word, ever do you find the word spirituality. You never find the word social justice or human rights in those lexicons of millions of management magazines and management books. But rarely do you find the word community, community as a spiritual engagement. So for me, work as community was one of the most important things I concentrated. It's a place where my company, we have a commune or a co-op or whatever you like to call it, a campus with over 1,000 people working for a common good, with a common purpose. Now, how did I shape that community through other than being just a production time quality management, And I think what I did that was very interesting, I realized it was no longer a family, it was too big to be a family. It was a community with a sort of a shared interest. And it was for not only just for the creation of a livelihood, we would have to go beyond that. And I had to bring in a sense of entertainment, a sense of wonderment and awe. And the first thing I dealt with was the aesthetics of the workplace. When I go into offices and when I go into universities and see nothing but bare walls, it drives me nuts. So I looked at what I could do with my workplace. For a start, I learned from other companies. I learned from Ben & Jerry's ice cream that they had the best tour in Vermont where they made their ice cream. And that people were going, thousands of people was going on the Ben & Jerry tour, mostly to get the free ice cream, but also to see how things worked. So I took from Ben, I said, I'm going to do the same with my company. And I'm going to have these Indonesian little buggies touring people around it. At its best, the Body Shop had nearly 180,000 people coming here to see how we manufactured, how we trained, how we observed, how we made our products. We even had the centre opened up by Prince Charles, and we had to drag every child in from the local schools because nobody was interested in seeing it. So there was our buggy. And then when they went around the tour, and it had to be a carnival, Ben Cohen said to me from Ben & Jerry's, make it a carnival. Make it look like a carnival, because when you have a carnival, you have a carnival spirit, and then you have a carnival energy. And all these 180,000 a year visitors were waving to our employees, making fun with our employees, joking with them. And it didn't disrupt the workplace because they were observing. But it made the workplace a little more exciting than just playing pipe music. So if they went into our factory, they could see our work, some of our employees in the factory suspended on bananas. These were models, because most of the people in my company hate bananas, because we have, tons and tons and tons of bananas. coming in to be made into banana shampoo and banana conditioner. And there's not one machine that takes a banana peel from a banana. And these men used to have to peel thousands and thousands of bananas, millions of them, and they had to separate the spines, so they hated it. So I immortalized the 3 or 4 men on putting them on these little bananas. And if you go into our offices, the first thing you see is an example of Degas de Journey Soulaire, which is a very famous impressionist art. We put it in fiberglass, right on that campus grass, and it gives a sense of fun, if nothing else. All over the company, there's quotes, there's affirmations, there's fun. Even on the car park, we have quotes from George Bernard Shaw saying, "I have hope for the human race when I see a man on a bicycle." And so I framed this community. I found that being part of a community of my company had always given me this unprecedented, in the early days, an opportunity to create a special place. In that place, service had to be honoured. Early on in my life, I read a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, which said, when he defined spirituality as being in service to the weak and the frail. And I wanted service, not just the ability to serve customers well, but to work in poorer countries, bringing my stock into these war-torn zones and help. And that has been the best definition of spirituality I've ever come across in a workplace. The parent had to be served, children had to be protected. Most of my employees, most of them were under 27, female, and they wanted the job there. They loved the job. They were well paid. It was being educational. They were giving money every year. They give you money called the Love Program, where they're allowed to spend it on anything they want, as long as it wasn't golf, and as long as it wasn't anything to do with being in business. Shaping a skillful business. If you wanted to go tightrope walking, if you wanted to learn swimming, French, the money was given to all our employees to do that. And that's what the community, the first thing our employees said, protect our children. So what we did was we set up a child development centre in the workplace. This was very rare in England because Mrs. Thatcher, when we opened up our company, who I laughingly say, she had more testosterone than most of her cabinet, didn't want to see women work. And so the family was never protected. So we decided to open up a daycare and child development centre with 50 children from 5 months to 5 years and another 60 up to 12 years during the holidays. It humanised the workplace. It is the responsibility of the employees to help with the workers. And the most important thing when we asked our workers, what can we do to shape your life, make it easier, they all said daycare centre, a child development centre. And so I believe that was one of the most important things that we did within our workplace. And it's a web of community. The idea that companies give back to their communities is as old as business itself. In the 16th century in England, Queen Elizabeth I said that any merchant that had the right to trade had to give a proportion of his money back to the community. So it's not news. We talked about the Quakers, we talked earlier on, I talked about the cooperative movement. Businesses, if they isolate themselves from the problems of the country or the community itself, I believe it's short-sighted. I believe we in retail had to protect the main streets, the high streets, and by doing that we had to help the back streets. So when I went into communities like some of the worst housing living communities in Western Europe, like Glasgow, where nobody was employed in it, this is a normal street 15 years ago in Glasgow, we decided to open up a soap factory right in the centre to employ over 120 people making these millions and millions of bars of soap. And they were going to get the best pay conditions and the best conditions any worker had, equal to the ones we were getting our own employees down south in England. And we were going to put 25% of all the profits we made from that factory into this community. First thing we did, we built an adventure playground for kids. We brought the army in, who were really good at doing adventure playgrounds, and we asked them to do that. Second thing, a drop-in centre for the elderly. Loneliness is the bleeding dilemma of our society at this moment. And I think any business, any product that shaves away loneliness is going to be a business or an enterprise that will last forever. So we've written Centre for the Lonely, the Elderly, work centres for young kids who weren't educated, teaching them the skills of massage and hairdressing, and it's paid back, a millionfold. And so, for me, going back into the back streets, and I haven't seen the dilemma here, it must be somewhere, of homeless people. In England, it was a national disaster. How many young, when Mrs. Thatcher closed the mental institutions, and many of the people were, manic depressive or schizophrenic, were often out of the communities, out of their homes, into the communities. And a lot of them were ending up homeless. So we decided to set up a street newspaper sold by the homeless. So they got a percentage of the money, kept that money completely theirs. And it gave them, now it has got them off the streets, gave them a livelihood.